Hello everyone and welcome. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your support. If you find these stories resonate with you, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share this video. Your support means the world to me and helps us continue bringing you these anonymous, true stories. These are real experiences shared with the hope that they might offer solace, understanding, or even a little bit of guidance. They are whispers from the shadows, and we thank you for lending an ear. And now let's listen to this story. Sarah and I, we were the couple everyone envied. High school sweethearts, a whirlwind romance that somehow blossomed into something real, something lasting. We built our life together, brick by brick, each memory a carefully laid stone in the foundation of what I thought was an impenetrable fortress. I remember the day I asked her to marry me. We were on the beach, the sun setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, mirroring the blush on her cheeks as she said yes. It felt like a movie too perfect to be real. But it was real. It was our reality. We spent the next few years exploring, traveling, laughing, and falling deeper in love with each other every single day. We built a home, not just a house, but a home filled with warmth, love, and the comforting rhythm of shared lives. We had a dog, a golden retriever named Max, who was as much a part of our family as we were. He'd greet us at the door with ecstatic wags, a furry embodiment of the joy that permeated our home. We'd spend weekends hiking, camping, just enjoying each other's company, completely content in our little bubble of happiness. I remember the small things too, the things that seem so insignificant now, but back then, they were the threads that wove together the tapestry of our love. The way she'd hum softly while cooking dinner, the way she'd always leave me a little note in my lunchbox, the way she'd reach for my hand when we were watching a movie, even after all those years. These were the things that made her, her. These were the things I loved about her. These were the things I thought would never change. I thought we were unbreakable. I thought we were different. We had our disagreements, of course every couple does. But we always resolved them, always came out stronger on the other side. We prided ourselves on our communication, on our ability to talk through anything, no matter how difficult. We were a team. A partnership. A love story for the ages. That's what I believed anyway. And then there was Mark, my best friend. We'd known each other since childhood, shared countless adventures, secrets, and heartaches. He was the brother I never had. He was there for me through everything, the good and the bad. He was at our wedding, standing beside me as my best man, a proud and happy witness to the beginning of our forever. He was always around, a constant presence in our lives, a part of our extended family. Sarah and Mark, they got along great, which of course made me happy. They shared a similar sense of humor, similar interests. They were comfortable around each other like old friends. I never thought anything of it. Why would I? They were my best friend and my wife. The two people I trusted most in the world. It was a comfortable, familiar dynamic, a cornerstone of our social life. We'd often have dinner together, go to concerts, weekend getaways. The three of us. A perfect triangle of friendship and love. Looking back, I wonder, was it all an illusion? Was I blinded by my own happiness, too naive to see the cracks forming beneath the surface? Were there signs I missed, whispers of discontent that I chose to ignore? Was that happiness really as sustainable as I thought? Perhaps I was too complacent, too confident in the invincibility of our love. Perhaps I took her for granted. Perhaps I just wasn't paying enough attention. It's a bitter pill to swallow, the realization that the perfect picture you painted in your mind was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, hiding a darkness you never imagined existed. And now as I sit here years later, sifting through the ashes of what was, I can't help but ask myself, where did it all go wrong? The slow creep. That's how it started. Not with a bang, but with a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. Like the slow draining of air from a tire, you don't notice it at first, but eventually you realize you're driving on a flat. It wasn't one big event, one dramatic fight, or one obvious red flag. It was a collection of small, seemingly insignificant changes that, in retrospect, painted a clear picture of what was to come. Sarah started spending more time at work, working late nights, attending conferences. I didn't think much of it initially. She was ambitious, career-driven. I admired that about her. But then the late nights became more frequent, the conferences longer. She was always tired, stressed, distant. Our conversations became shorter, less intimate. We used to talk for hours, sharing our dreams, our fears, our day-to-day experiences. Now it was just logistics. What's for dinner? Did you pick up the dry cleaning? Don't forget to walk the dog. The spark, that vibrant connection we once shared, seemed to have dimmed, replaced by a dull, functional routine. I tried to talk to her about it, to ask her if everything was okay. But she'd brush it off, saying she was just stressed about work, that she needed some space. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But something felt off. Something felt wrong. She started paying more attention to her appearance, which on the surface seemed like a good thing. But it was different. It wasn't for me, it felt like new clothes, new makeup, new hairstyles. Things she hadn't done in years. I remember one night we were getting ready to go out for dinner. I complimented her on her dress, a beautiful, form-fitting black dress that I'd never seen before. She just smiled, a tight, almost strained smile, and said, "Thanks." I just felt like dressing up. It felt hollow. Like she was saying the words she thought I wanted to hear, but without any genuine emotion behind them. And then there was Mark. He started coming around less often. Which, again, I didn't think much of at first. He was busy, he had his own life. But when he did come around, he seemed different, distant, avoidant. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He'd make excuses to leave early. He'd be unusually quiet, almost sullen. I remember one evening we were all sitting in the living room watching a movie. Sarah and Mark were sitting next to each other on the couch, and I noticed them exchanging glances, quick, fleeting glances that they quickly averted when I looked their way. It was a small thing, but it made me uneasy. It planted a seed of doubt in my mind, a tiny, insidious seed that would eventually grow into a monstrous tree of suspicion. I tried to ignore the signs, to rationalize them, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. I didn't want to believe that something was wrong. I didn't want to face the possibility that the perfect life I'd built was crumbling around me. I told myself that Sarah was just stressed, that Mark was just going through a tough time. I told myself that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Deep down, I knew that something was terribly, terribly wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. I was afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of losing everything. And so, I buried my head in the sand, hoping that the storm would pass. Hoping that things would go back to normal. But they didn't. They never did. Have you ever felt that way, the creeping dread that something is amiss, but you're too scared to confront it? It's a uniquely agonizing feeling. The unease, the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong, it started to consume me. Like a slow-burning fire, it gnawed at my insides, leaving me restless, anxious, and constantly on edge. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind was constantly racing, replaying every interaction, every conversation, every fleeting glance, searching for clues, for answers. The rationalizations I had been clinging to started to crumble, replaced by a growing suspicion that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The late nights at work, the new clothes, the distant demeanor, the awkward glances between Sarah and Mark, it all started to add up. I started paying closer attention to Sarah's phone. Not in an overt way, but subtly, casually. I'd notice who she was texting, who she was calling. I'd try to catch a glimpse of her screen when she was using it. I know it sounds terrible, and it was. I hated myself for it. I hated the idea of snooping through her personal life. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know. I needed to find some kind of proof, some kind of confirmation, one way or the other. I remember one evening, Sarah was in the shower, and her phone was lying on the bed, buzzing incessantly. I told myself I wouldn't do it, that it was a violation of her privacy, that I needed to trust her. But the buzzing wouldn't stop. It was like a siren calling to me, luring me closer. I hesitated for a moment, then reached for the phone. The screen lit up, revealing a message from Mark. It was a simple message, just a few words. But it was enough. It was enough to send a shiver down my spine, to confirm my worst fears. The message said, "Thinking of you." I quickly put the phone back down, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world seemed to spin around me, the room blurring into a hazy, indistinct mess. Thinking of you. 3 simple words, but they carried the weight of 1,000 betrayals. They were a dagger to my heart, a confirmation of my deepest, darkest fears. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run away and never look back. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by the shock of it all. I tried to tell myself that it was just a friendly message, that I was overreacting, that I was reading too much into it. But I knew better. I knew that it was more than just a friendly message. I knew that it was a sign of something deeper, something more intimate, something that I didn't want to believe was real. The seed of doubt that had been planted in my mind had now sprouted, its roots digging deep into my soul, poisoning everything it touched. The thought of Sarah and Mark together in that way, it made me want to vomit. It was a betrayal on so many levels, a violation of everything I held sacred. I started to notice other things too, things I had previously dismissed as insignificant. The way they'd laugh at each other's jokes, jokes that I didn't understand. The way they'd finish each other's sentences. The way they'd always seemed to be in sync, like they were operating on some kind of unspoken wavelength. I started to question everything, to doubt everything, to wonder if I had ever really known them at all. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was going on. I just needed more proof. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. But a part of me didn't want to find it. A part of me wanted to cling to the illusion, to the hope that I was wrong, that everything was just a misunderstanding. Because if I found the truth, if I confirmed my suspicions, then I would have to face the reality of what was happening. I would have to confront Sarah and Mark. I would have to make a decision about my future. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. The internal conflict was tearing me apart, the constant battle between wanting to know the truth and fearing what that truth might be. It was a tormenting, agonizing experience. The message, "thinking of you," was a starting point, a catalyst. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to push me over the edge, to ignite a fire under me. I knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. So, I started my investigation. A clandestine, agonizing, and utterly humiliating investigation into the lives of the two people I loved and trusted most in the world. The guilt was immense, a constant companion, whispering in my ear, reminding me that I was betraying Sarah's privacy, that I was stooping to a level I never thought I was capable of. But the need to know, the burning desire for the truth, outweighed the guilt. I had to find out what was going on. I started with Sarah's phone. I knew her passcode, a simple combination she'd used for years. I waited until she was asleep, then carefully retrieved her phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I entered the code, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like a criminal, invading her personal space, violating her trust. I scrolled through her text messages, her emails, her social media accounts. I was looking for anything that would confirm my suspicions. It was tedious, painstaking work. Hours of scrolling through endless streams of messages, searching for a hidden clue, a secret code, a telltale sign. I found some flirtatious messages with other people, guys from work, old friends. But nothing concrete, nothing that indicated a full-blown affair. Just harmless flirting, the kind of banter that I'd always known she engaged in. I almost felt relieved, like maybe I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid. But then I found it. Hidden deep within her photos, a folder labeled Memories. I opened it and my blood ran cold. The photos were of Sarah and Mark. They were on a weekend getaway, a trip they'd supposedly taken with a group of friends. But the photos told a different story. Photos of them holding hands, laughing, kissing. Photos of them cuddling by a campfire, gazing into each other's eyes. Photos that spoke volumes, photos that left no room for doubt. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me, the walls closing in, suffocating me. The images seared themselves into my brain, burning themselves into my memory, forever etched into my soul. I closed the phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I wanted to smash it, to destroy it, to erase the images from my mind. But I couldn't. The truth was out there, staring me in the face. And I couldn't ignore it any longer. I also started tracking Sarah's movements. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, a small device that would allow me to see where she was going, who she was meeting. Again, I hated myself for it. It felt like such a violation of her privacy, such a blatant display of distrust. But I felt like I had no other choice. I needed to know. The tracker confirmed my worst fears. It showed her visiting Mark's apartment at odd hours, spending hours there, sometimes overnight. It showed her taking long, circuitous routes to work, detouring to meet Mark in secret locations. The evidence was mounting, piling up, crushing me under its weight. I felt incredibly alone during this time. I couldn't talk to anyone about what was happening. I was too ashamed, too embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to know that my wife was cheating on me with my best friend. I didn't want to be pitted, to be judged, to be the subject of gossip. So, I kept it all bottled up inside, a secret that was slowly eating me alive. I felt like I was living a double life, pretending that everything was normal, while secretly spiraling into despair. It was an isolating, agonizing experience. One evening, I decided to confront Mark. I went to his apartment, unannounced, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream at him, to punch him, to demand answers. But when he opened the door, I just stood there, speechless, the words caught in my throat. He looked surprised to see me, a flicker of guilt flashing across his face. "Hey man," he said, trying to sound casual. "What's up?" I just stared at him, my eyes filled with rage and betrayal. "Don't play dumb with me, Mark," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I know everything. The look on Mark's face was all the confirmation I needed. The forced casualness vanished, replaced by a look of utter panic and guilt. He tried to deny it, of course. He stammered, he stuttered, he offered a series of weak, pathetic excuses. But it was too late. I'd seen the photos. I tracked the car. I knew the truth. "Don't lie to me, Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" He looked down at the ground, avoiding my gaze. He shuffled his feet, he wrung his hands. He looked like a cornered animal, trapped and desperate. I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled. I snapped. The rage that had been simmering inside me finally boiled over. I grabbed him by the collar, my grip tightening around his neck. "Don't you dare lie to me," I shouted, my voice filled with fury. "I know you've been sleeping with my wife. I have proof. Just tell me the truth." He finally broke down. He started to cry, tears streaming down his face. Okay, he sobbed. "It's true. It's been going on for a while. I'm so sorry." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I released him, stumbling backwards, my head spinning. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "How could you betray me like this? You're my best friend." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with remorse. "I don't know," he said. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear." "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You just happened to sleep with my wife? You just happened to betray me in the worst possible way? Is that what you're telling me?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, sobbing, his head hung low. I turned and walked away, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I felt numb, empty, like a hollow shell. The world seemed to lose its color, fading into a dull, gray monochrome. I drove home in a daze, the road blurring before my eyes. I barely remember getting there. I walked into the house and Sarah was waiting for me. She looked worried, her eyes filled with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked. "You look terrible." I just stared at her, my face expressionless. "I know," I said, my voice flat. "I know about you and Mark." Her face paled, her eyes widening in horror. What are you talking about?" she stammered. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. How did you get these?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that they're real. You've been sleeping with my best friend. How could you do this to me?" She started to cry, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice filled with the same sarcasm I'd used with Mark. "That's your excuse? It just happened?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, sobbing, her face buried in her hands. I felt a wave of anger wash over me, a burning, white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. I wanted to scream, to yell, to lash out. But I couldn't. I was too numb, too devastated. I just stood there, staring at her, my heart breaking with every passing second. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. It felt like an eternity. Finally I spoke. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pleading. "Please," she begged. "Don't do this. I can explain. We can work through this. I promise." "There's nothing to explain," I said. "And there's nothing to work through. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You broke my heart. And I can never forgive you for that." I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, sobbing. I went into the bedroom and started packing a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not for another minute. I needed to escape, to get away from the pain, the betrayal, the crushing weight of it all. I left the house, driving away into the night, leaving my old life behind me, shattered into a million pieces. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Driving away that night felt like escaping a burning building. The further I got, the more I could breathe. But the smoke of the fire, the acrid smell of betrayal, clung to me, permeating everything. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. It was a far cry from the beautiful home Sarah and I had built together, but it was a sanctuary, a place where I could lick my wounds and try to make sense of what had happened. Sleep was impossible. My mind was a relentless battlefield, replaying the events of the day, torturing me with images of Sarah and Mark together. The questions swirled in my head, a dizzying vortex of confusion and pain. How could they do this to me? What did I do wrong? Was our entire relationship a lie? Did they ever even care about me? The next few days were a blur. I barely ate, barely slept, barely functioned. I called in sick to work, telling them I had the flu. I couldn't face anyone, couldn't bear the thought of explaining what had happened. I spent hours staring at the television, flipping through channels, but nothing registered. The world outside seemed distant, unreal, like I was watching it through a thick pane of glass. Sarah called repeatedly. I ignored her calls. I couldn't talk to her. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, her justifications, her lies. I needed time to process, to grieve, to try to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. Finally, I relented and answered one of her calls. "Please, my name," she sobbed. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." "Oh really?" I said, my voice flat. "Then what is it, Sarah? Tell me. I'm all ears." She launched into a long, rambling explanation, a convoluted tale of loneliness, insecurity, and unmet needs. She said she felt neglected, that I wasn't paying enough attention to her, that she felt invisible. She said Mark was there for her, that he listened to her, that he made her feel valued. She claimed it started as just friendship, a harmless connection, but then it escalated slowly, gradually, until it spiraled out of control. I listened in silence, my heart hardening with every word. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying to blame me, to justify her actions by painting herself as the victim. "So it's my fault?" I said, my voice rising in anger. "Is that what you're saying? That you cheated on me because I didn't pay enough attention to you? Because I didn't make you feel valued enough? Is that your excuse?" She started to cry again. "No, that's not what I'm saying," she sobbed. "I'm just trying to explain. I'm not trying to justify my actions. I know what I did was wrong. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Sarah," I said. "You destroyed our marriage. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You slept with my best friend. How can I ever forgive you for that?" She didn't have an answer. She just kept crying, begging for my forgiveness. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with anger and disgust. I couldn't listen to her anymore. I couldn't bear the sound of her voice. Later that day, Mark called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Mark?" I said, my voice cold. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice subdued. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Mark," I said. "You destroyed our friendship. You betrayed my trust. You slept with my wife. How can I ever forgive you for that?" He didn't have an answer. He just mumbled something about regretting his actions, about wishing he could take it all back. "I never meant to hurt you, my name," he said. "I swear. It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, the same sarcasm dripping from my voice as before. "That's your excuse? It just happened?" He didn't answer. I hung up the phone, my heart filled with bitterness and resentment. I couldn't believe that these were the people I had loved and trusted most in the world. They had both betrayed me, in the most profound and devastating way possible. And now they were both offering me hollow apologies, expecting me to forgive them, to move on, to pretend that nothing had happened. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. The pain was too deep, the betrayal too profound. I knew that my life would never be the same. Do you think you could ever forgive such a betrayal? The world felt like it was tilting on its axis. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, had been upended, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty and pain. The days bled into weeks, each one a monotonous cycle of sleepless nights, tearful mornings, and a constant, gnawing emptiness that threatened to consume me whole. My appetite vanished. Food tasted like ash in my mouth. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame, a visible testament to the invisible wounds that were tearing me apart. My mind was a relentless tormentor, replaying the events of the past, magnifying my insecurities, and whispering insidious doubts in my ear. I'd find myself staring at photos of Sarah and me, remembering the happy moments, the shared laughter, the promises we'd made to each other. And then the images would morph, replaced by visions of Sarah and Mark together, their betrayal a constant, agonizing reminder of my loss. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me, vivid and disturbing dreams in which Sarah and Mark would taunt me, mocking my pain, reveling in their betrayal. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, my body trembling, the echoes of their laughter ringing in my ears. Even when I managed to drift off, my sleep was restless and fitful, punctuated by jolts of panic and a constant sense of unease. The loneliness was crushing. I isolated myself from my friends and family, unable to bear the thought of sharing my pain, of exposing my vulnerability. I didn't want their pity, their advice, their well-meaning platitudes. I just wanted to be left alone, to wallow in my misery, to nurse my broken heart in silence. The house felt empty, haunted by the ghosts of our shared memories. Every object, every photograph, every piece of furniture served as a painful reminder of what I had lost. I couldn't bear to be there, surrounded by the wreckage of our shattered life. So, I spent most of my time wandering aimlessly, driving around the city, trying to outrun my thoughts, to escape the suffocating weight of my grief. I'd drive for hours, listening to music, staring out the window, watching the world go by, feeling like an outsider, disconnected from everything and everyone. The joy of life seemed to have vanished, replaced by a dull, gray apathy. I struggled to find meaning in anything, to feel any spark of hope or enthusiasm. The future stretched before me, a bleak and desolate landscape, devoid of color or promise. I considered reaching out to a therapist, but the thought of opening up to a stranger, of dredging up the pain and reliving the trauma, felt overwhelming. I was afraid of what they might say, of what I might discover about myself. I was afraid of facing the reality of my situation, of admitting that I was broken, that I needed help. So, I continued to suffer in silence, bearing the weight of my heartbreak alone. The physical symptoms of my emotional distress began to manifest. I developed headaches, stomachaches, and a constant, nagging fatigue. I lost interest in my hobbies, in the things that used to bring me joy. I stopped exercising, stopped eating healthy, stopped taking care of myself. I felt like I was slowly withering away, fading into oblivion. I knew I needed to do something to take control of my life, to start the process of healing. But I didn't know where to begin. The pain was too intense, the wounds too deep. I felt lost, adrift, and utterly hopeless. Have you ever felt so broken that you didn't know how to start putting yourself back together? The inertia couldn't last forever. Eventually, the numbness began to wear off, replaced by a simmering anger and a desperate need for action. I knew I couldn't continue to wallow in my misery, to let the pain consume me. I had to make a decision, to choose a path forward, to reclaim control of my life. But what path to choose? That was the question that tormented me, the decision that paralyzed me with fear and uncertainty. The most pressing question, of course, was what to do about the marriage. Was there any hope of salvaging it? Could I ever forgive Sarah for her betrayal? Could I ever trust her again? A part of me, a small, foolish, and stubbornly hopeful part, wanted to believe that reconciliation was possible. I remembered the happy times, the love we had shared, the promises we had made. I clung to the hope that we could somehow overcome this obstacle, that we could emerge stronger and more resilient on the other side. But the rational part of me, the part that had been shattered by the betrayal, knew that it was unlikely. The trust was gone, irrevocably broken. The foundation of our relationship had crumbled. How could we rebuild something solid on such unstable ground? The thought of divorce was terrifying. It meant admitting failure, acknowledging that the dream I had cherished for so long was dead. It meant dividing our assets, selling our home, and dismantling the life we had built together. It meant facing the stigma of being a divorced man, of being seen as a failure in the eyes of society. But the thought of staying in the marriage, of living with the constant reminder of Sarah's betrayal, was even more unbearable. The resentment, the anger, the pain, it would fester and grow, poisoning our relationship and making us both miserable. I considered seeking counseling, but the thought of airing our dirty laundry to a stranger, of reliving the trauma in a sterile, clinical setting, filled me with dread. I wasn't sure if I could bring myself to be that vulnerable, to expose my deepest wounds to someone I didn't know. And even if we did go to counseling, would it even work? Could a therapist really help us to overcome such a profound betrayal? Or would it just be a waste of time and money, a futile attempt to resuscitate a corpse? The decision weighed heavily on me, a constant burden that I carried with me everywhere I went. I talked to my parents, seeking their advice and guidance. But they were just as torn as I was. My mother, a staunch believer in the sanctity of marriage, urged me to try to work things out, to give Sarah another chance. My father, on the other hand, was more pragmatic, advising me to protect myself, to cut my losses, and to move on with my life. I talked to my friends, seeking their support and encouragement. They were more unequivocal in their condemnation of Sarah's actions, urging me to file for divorce immediately. They couldn't understand how I could even consider staying with someone who had betrayed me in such a callous and unforgivable way. But ultimately the decision was mine and mine alone. I had to weigh the pros and cons, to consider the long-term consequences, and to choose the path that I believed would lead to the greatest happiness, or at least the least amount of pain. After weeks of agonizing deliberation, I finally made my decision. I decided to file for divorce. It was the hardest decision I had ever made in my life, but I knew it was the right one. I couldn't forgive Sarah. I couldn't trust her. And I couldn't spend the rest of my life living with the shadow of her betrayal hanging over me. The decision brought a sense of relief, a lifting of the burden that had been weighing me down for so long. But it also brought a fresh wave of pain, a realization of the finality of my loss. The dream was over. The marriage was dead. And I had to face the reality of building a new life for myself, alone. What factors would you consider when making such a life-altering decision? Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. I started to take care of myself again, eating healthy, exercising regularly, and getting enough sleep. I reconnected with old friends, rekindled forgotten hobbies, and started to explore new interests. I joined a hiking group, took a cooking class, and even tried my hand at pottery. These activities helped me to distract myself from my pain, to focus on something positive, and to reconnect with the joy of living. I also started to address the anger and resentment that I had been harboring towards Sarah and Mark. My therapist encouraged me to practice forgiveness, not for their sake but for my own. She explained that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It was only hurting me, keeping me stuck in the past and preventing me from moving on with my life. Forgiveness was a long and difficult process. It wasn't about condoning their actions or pretending that they hadn't hurt me. It was about releasing the emotional burden of resentment, about accepting that what had happened was in the past, and about choosing to focus on the present and the future. I started by writing letters to Sarah and Mark, expressing my anger, my pain, and my disappointment. I didn't send the letters, but the act of writing them helped me to release my emotions, to process my grief, and to gain a new perspective on the situation. I also started to practice mindfulness, focusing on the present moment, and paying attention to my thoughts and feelings without judgment. This helped me to become more aware of my emotional triggers, to manage my anxiety and depression, and to cultivate a sense of inner peace. I learned to accept my feelings, to acknowledge my pain, and to allow myself to grieve without getting overwhelmed by my emotions. I also started to work on rebuilding my self-esteem, which had been severely damaged by the betrayal. I realized that Sarah's actions were not a reflection of my worth as a person, but rather a reflection of her own insecurities and unmet needs. I focused on my strengths, my accomplishments, and my positive qualities. I started to believe in myself again, to trust my judgment, and to value my own worth. I also started to work on rebuilding my trust in others. I realized that not everyone is like Sarah and Mark, that there are still good, honest, and trustworthy people in the world. I started to open myself up to new relationships, to allow myself to be vulnerable, and to trust that I would be able to recognize and avoid toxic people in the future. The process of recovery was slow and arduous, filled with setbacks and challenges. There were days when I felt like I was making progress and days when I felt like I was back at square one. But I persisted, determined to heal, to move on, and to create a new and fulfilling life for myself. I realized that the betrayal, while incredibly painful, had also been a catalyst for growth, an opportunity to learn, to evolve, and to become a stronger and more resilient person. I started to see the experience as a turning point in my life, a chance to redefine myself, to pursue my passions, and to create a future that was aligned with my values and my goals. This experience, though devastating, made me question, analyze, and reflect on my mistakes, my flaws, what I would have done differently, and what I should expect from the next relationship. Healing is not linear, but the willingness to heal sets you free. Have you ever felt that pain can be a catalyst for a better you? Looking back on the experience years later, I can see the valuable lessons I learned, the hard-won wisdom that emerged from the ashes of my shattered world. The most important lesson, perhaps, was the importance of communication in a relationship. I realized that Sarah and I had stopped communicating effectively long before the affair began. We had stopped sharing our feelings, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams. We had stopped listening to each other, truly listening with empathy and understanding. We had allowed our relationship to become stagnant, to fall into a predictable routine, neglecting the emotional intimacy that had once bound us together. I learned that communication is not just about talking, but about listening, about being present, about being vulnerable, and about being willing to share your innermost thoughts and feelings. I learned that it's essential to nurture the emotional connection in a relationship, to prioritize quality time together, to express appreciation and affection, and to continuously work on strengthening the bond. Another important lesson was the importance of self-awareness. I realized that I had been too focused on Sarah, on meeting her needs, and on making her happy, that I had neglected my own needs and desires. I had allowed myself to become codependent, relying on her for my sense of self-worth, and sacrificing my own interests and passions in the process. I learned that it's essential to maintain a sense of individuality in a relationship, to pursue your own interests, to cultivate your own friendships, and to prioritize your own well-being. I learned that a healthy relationship is one in which both partners are independent and self-sufficient, while also being emotionally connected and supportive of each other. I also learned the importance of trust. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, it's incredibly difficult to repair. I realized that I had taken Sarah's trust for granted, assuming that she would always be faithful, without actively working to maintain her trust. I learned that trust is earned, not given, and that it requires constant effort, honesty, transparency, and a commitment to integrity. If I could offer advice to others who are experiencing or may experience a similar situation, it would be this. Prioritize communication in your relationship, nurture the emotional connection, maintain a sense of individuality, and build a foundation of trust. If you suspect that your partner is being unfaithful, don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut, communicate your concerns, and seek professional help if needed. And if you discover that your partner has betrayed you, allow yourself to grieve, to heal, and to move on with your life. Don't let the experience define you or prevent you from finding happiness in the future. As for my own future, I'm cautiously optimistic. I've started dating again, and while it's nerve-wracking, I'm also excited about the possibility of finding love again. I'm approaching new relationships with more awareness, more self-confidence, and a greater appreciation for what I'm looking for in a partner. I know that I deserve to be with someone who is honest, trustworthy, and committed to building a loving and supportive relationship. I'm also focused on pursuing my passions, on building a fulfilling career, and on creating a life that is meaningful and purpose-driven. I've learned that happiness comes from within, and that I don't need to rely on another person to complete me. I am complete on my own, and any future relationship will be an addition to my life, not a requirement for my happiness. The scars from the betrayal will always be there, a reminder of the pain I endured, but they are also a testament to my resilience, my strength, and my ability to heal. I am a survivor, not a victim. And I am determined to live a happy, fulfilling, and meaningful life, despite everything that has happened. I hope you too can find that strength within yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. It takes courage to share these stories, and it takes empathy to listen. I hope this narrative resonated with you, offering perhaps a new perspective or a reminder that you're not alone. If you have your own experiences, feel free to share them anonymously in the comments. Remember, sharing is healing. And until next time, take care.